means? And if you do you think it's even going to work? And joining me tonight on Talking Pints, the former Treasurer of the Conservative Party, Lord Marland. Before all of that, let's get the news.
Nigel, thank you. The top stories. The Prime Minister has told President Vladimir Putin that any Russian incursion into Ukraine would be a tragic miscalculation. Boris Johnson and Vladimir Putin held a phone call about the tensions over Ukraine earlier. According to Number 10, both leaders agreed that aggravation was in no one's interest. That comes as the US President Joe Biden sent nearly 3,000 extra American troops onto Eastern Europe. John Kirby from the US Department of Defense said the troops are there to bolster Ukraine's defenses.
The United States will soon move additional forces to Romania, Poland, and Germany. I want to be very clear about something. These are not permanent moves. These forces are not going to fight in Ukraine. They are going to ensure the robust defense of our NATO allies.
John Kirby. Well, in other news tonight, Northern Ireland's Minister for Agriculture has ordered all post-Brexit checks on goods coming from the rest of the United Kingdom to stop from midnight tonight. Edwin Poots says he sought legal advice which supports his view that he's entitled to stop the checks. The checks are being imposed by the Northern Ireland Protocol, which was agreed by the UK and the EU to ensure the free movement of trade across the Irish border after Brexit. But the DUP minister believes it's created instability within the country's power-sharing institutions. More on that from Nigel Farage.
In the absence of executive approval, I have now issued a formal instruction to my Permanent Secretary to halt all checks that were not in place on the 31st of December 2020 from midnight tonight. I'll prepare a paper for executive consideration in the near future to seek agreement on a way forward.
As I said, more on that in Nigel Farage's programme next. The Levelling Up Secretary has unveiled the government's plans to tackle regional inequalities. Michael Gove pledged that by 2030, pay, employment and productivity will all grow in every area of the UK, in turn for boosting the UK's economy by tens of billions of pounds annually.
The gap between much of the South East and the rest of the country in productivity, in health outcomes, in wages, in school results and in job opportunities must be closed. And the economic prize from levelling up is potentially enormous. If underperforming places were levelled up towards the UK average, unlocking their full potential, it could boost aggregate UK GDP by tens of billions of pounds each year.
Michael Gove. 5 Insulate Britain activists were jailed at the High Court today after breaching an injunction on the M25. 11 other protesters have received suspended prison sentences after taking part in demonstrations last October. And the Duchess of Cambridge is the new patron of the Rugby Football Union and the Rugby Football League. She takes over the role from Prince Harry. Kensington Palace saying the appointment is due to her long-standing passion for sport. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News. Now more from Farage.
Good evening. The government's big push today is levelling up, with Michael Gove releasing a white paper, delivering it to the Commons, and we'll discuss tonight with you. Do you know what levelling up means? Is it rather like the Northern powerhouse under the previous Conservative government? Is it a vague concept, or could it actually work? You tell me. Will levelling up work? Farage at gbnews.uk. But ahead of that, an announcement in Northern Ireland in the course of the last hour. And the Agriculture Minister has announced that checks in the Irish Sea, those contentious checks of goods that are coming from the mainland United Kingdom to Northern Ireland, will end from midnight tonight. Now, in many ways, this is the Northern Irish Minister deciding he can't wait any longer. The British government clearly have no intention in the short term of triggering Article 16. They feel that Northern Ireland has effectively been cut off from the rest of the United Kingdom by the Northern Ireland Protocol, by the Brexit agreement. I say they've every reason to believe that is right. And so they've taken this action. Quite how this will be responded to by the British government in the next couple of days, I'm not sure. And the European Union, well, they, of course, will be furious. And there is a meeting due next week between Liz Truss and Markus Sefcovic, from the European Union. So let's go over right now to Belfast to join Doogie Beattie, GB News' Northern Ireland reporter. Now, Doogie, of course, we mustn't forget that there are elections taking place to the Northern Ireland Assembly, and in many ways, this is the DUP putting down a marker, isn't it?
Well, you could think that way, but I think more than anything, most unionists, the only thing that the protocol has managed to do is unite unionism. And because of the lack of consent inside the protocol, basically unionists have no say. The European Courts of Justice will look across any divergence between UK laws and the EU. This part of the United Kingdom will be caught inside EU laws and regulations. There's no MEPs here. I continually say this. The only MEPs on the island of Ireland are in the Republic of Ireland, and Sinn Féin and the SDLP with their sister party Fianna Fáil do have MEPs. So unionists here feel very, very isolated and say we are now a colony. So they have decided that they may not even take part in elections here in Northern Ireland, and if they do, it will probably be a long, long time before these institutions are back up again after May. But on the other side of that coin, Sinn Féin have really checked out of Northern Ireland, out of this assembly here. They see the power now being in Dublin. They are the largest party in the Irish Republic, and they would love to take on Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil in an election in the south. And therefore, if this claps behind me, that the previous agreement of the Anglo-Irish agreement brought in joint authority between London and Dublin, Sinn Féin would not have to go through anything here to have power in Northern Ireland.
And you mentioned the word consent a moment ago, and of course that word was an important part, wasn't it, of the Belfast Peace Agreement. So do the unionists actually have some right, genuine right, to act in the way they are?
Well, you can see their point. I mean, we reported back in October with the PUP, the Progressive Unionist Party. They're the sort of the equivalent to Sinn Féin. They were the political wing of the loyalist paramilitaries. They withdrew their support for the Good Friday Agreement because they said they signed up to the Good Friday Agreement because of consent. And now Northern Ireland is lost in the middle of this, and I'm afraid if this isn't addressed quite quickly, we could be heading for very dark days in Northern Ireland. But Liz Truss visited here last week, and when she was asked about the potential for Edwin Poots to do this, she basically said no, the British government weren't getting involved. It was a devolved matter, and it would be up to the executive. Now, Edwin Poots took this to the executive last Thursday, and because everything has to be jointly agreed between First and Deputy First Minister, they're basically both exactly the same. Michelle O'Neill of Sinn Féin, the Deputy First Minister, refused to put it on the table, and Edwin Poots has took this decision by himself.
Yes, and I mean, Liz Truss can't walk away from this and say it's purely a devolved matter because the agreement with the European Union was signed by the British government. She is going to be the main representative of it next week in that meeting with Sefcovic. London has to give some kind of answer to this, doesn't it?
Well, they do, and this was Boris Johnson's oven-ready deal. But what he didn't, while he was signing one international agreement, he was overriding an international peace agreement that has been hailed across the world and as a roadmap for other ones in the Middle East. And he has broke that first agreement, i.e. the Good Friday Agreement, and the EU are quite happy to do so to protect the integrity of their single market. So the goods now that are coming into Northern Ireland from the UK will probably have to be checked somewhere about the Irish border. That creates a problem for Sinn Féin, it creates a problem for Fine Gael, and it creates a problem for Fianna Fáil.
Yeah, we've not heard the last of this, Doogie. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go now to Darren McCaffrey, GB News' political editor. Darren, they can't get away with saying this is a devolved matter, can they? I'm not hearing Darren, so when we get the sound sorted out, we will come back to Darren. Also happening, before we discuss levelling up, also happening, yesterday we had on the breakfast show here David Davis, and he was asked about what was happening with the Prime Minister. And he said he's going to die the death of 1,000 cuts, by which he means pillars of support, one by one, would gradually be removed. We saw the resignation of the first PPS earlier on in the week. We saw senior figures like Andrew Mitchell withdrawing their support earlier in the week. Yesterday, the Conservative Member of Parliament for Waveney, Mr Aldous, withdrew his support. And that death of 1,000 cuts, as Davis described, seems to have picked up a bit of pace today. Darren McCaffrey, can I hear you? No, I can't hear him, so there we are. I will get on with it myself. So today, 3 more Conservative members of Parliament have decided they can no longer support the Prime Minister, and they've put letters in to the 1922 committee. Now, we know when it reaches the number of 54, that will trigger a leadership process within the Conservative Party. But it is happening. Bit by bit, people are losing support in the Prime Minister. And it does have to be said that on the world stage, he's beginning to become a bit of a figure of fun. Even the White House press secretary yesterday making a joke about cake. We've had, well, the Russian press, of course, have rubbished him. You would expect that. And it was pretty embarrassing for the Prime Minister to be in Kiev yesterday having not spoken to President Putin. That just did not work. Now, he has spoken to President Putin today. I'll tell you more about that later in the show. But he's really having a difficult time, as I say. Those withdrawing publicly their support for the Prime Minister, that list is growing. And I know there's a number of you at home watching this programme, watching GB News, who think I've been Boris bashing. All I will say to you is this. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. It is a matter of trust. And I think when that trust goes, it's very difficult to win it back. And out there in the country, there are millions of people who voted Conservative in December 2019 who have lost that trust. So this is not a good situation for the Prime Minister at all. I still stick by what I've been saying. He won't be our leader by the 1st of July. And a lot of people don't like that because they're Boris fans, but that is just the way that it's going. 1 or 2 bits of reaction to the whole levelling up agenda, and indeed reaction to what Edwin Poots has done. Steve says, at last, a politician with guts, how refreshing. Another says, well done Pootsy for standing up to our gutless government. Ian says, do you believe the government will ever sort out these problems with this issue by May of this year? Well, we'll just have to see. Let's have a think about Michael Gove, shall we? You know, Michael Gove today delivering his 12 missions to level up the United Kingdom. And to me, when he talks about the fact that areas like transport should, by 2030, be as good around the rest of the United Kingdom as they are in London. When he talks about wealth spreading out. Firstly, I do genuinely think this looks a bit like a child's wish list to Father Christmas. Secondly, I'm actually unsure what the strategy is. Is it just to throw money at the red wall seats, or is it to try, through incentives, to encourage businesses to establish themselves there? Namely, are they going for a conservative, free market approach, or are they going for very much more of a statist approach? I'm confused as to what that's going to be. I'll be joined after the break by Liam Halligan, our economics editor, who is himself right now up in the northwest of England. I'm going to say third time lucky in going to our polled, Darren McCaffrey. Darren, good evening.
Can you hear me, Nigel?
I can.
Very good evening.
Darren, my first point to you...
Marvellous.
My first point to you was that in terms of what Edwin Poots, the Minister in Northern Ireland, has done today, Liz Truss can't hide behind the fact this is a devolved matter. She's got a meeting with Šefčovič, the European Commissioner, next week. The UK government have to respond to this, don't they?
Indeed, this is very tricky, and very tricky, it must be said, not just for the British government. And I say that because in many ways Edmund Poots has acted unilaterally tonight in making that move. It is not clear whether he's got the ability to actually command these civil servants to do so. Ultimately, they might argue they're acting under British law or international law. Ultimately, Westminster is sovereign in all of this. And the reason I also add on it is tricky is because ultimately Edmund Poots says he has sought legal advice, but under the agreement there needs to be essentially agreement amongst Sinn Féin and the DUP, all of the executive, which clearly there isn't. So it's not entirely clear just what ground he is standing on, but what is clear is clearly the DUP are fed up with all of this. As you've rightly pointed out, they're fed up with this idea that the British government is going to trigger Article 16, which they've talked about for the last 6 to 9 months, yet frankly given no indication that it's actually going to happen. And so Downing Street may well just sit back and let this play out, or it will get to the point where they may well have to intervene. And in doing that, the key figure will be the EU. How will the European Union react to all of this tonight? We've yet to hear from them, but we have heard from Simon Coveney, of course, the Irish Foreign Minister, in the last couple of minutes. He has said that it effectively is a breach of international law and that it is really unhelpful to the EU-British talks trying to reach a compromise. In the end, I think if the EU decide to take a hard line on this, if the action goes ahead, the British government are going to have to make a decision. Who are they going to back? Are they going to back the DUP in this and let this go ahead? Or are they going to essentially say we need to strike a deal and that the DUP are not allowed to go ahead with ordering civil servants to stop these checks?
They have got to make a very, very clear decision, and they've got just a few days in which to do it. Finally, Darren, quickly, I was making the point to the audience that those people publicly now saying they cannot support the Prime Minister, that's rather picked up pace today, hasn't it?
Yeah, it really has. 3 more letters in, including the Chair of the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood. A drip effect throughout the day. It might even allude to the fact that this is somewhat orchestrated. And there was a sense, I think, of anyone who watched Prime Minister's Question Time this afternoon. Keir Starmer didn't go on Partygate. He instead focused on the cost of living crisis. The Prime Minister put in a pretty good show, to be fair to him. There was a sense that maybe this was starting to ease away, but these letters continue to go in. We don't frankly know how many, but more and more publicly are coming out every day. It only does need to get to 54, and I think this is still really uncomfortable for the Prime Minister. And it's interesting, isn't it, Nigel, when you read what these MPs have to say, it really gets to the heart of the Prime Minister's character to a large degree, about mistruths and trust, but also this sense that they just do want this controversy and scandal to go away. And frankly, at the moment, for those MPs and for many who are not public, that's the greatest fear, is when does this end? And there is, frankly, no end in sight.
No, there's not. Darren, I will see you in Blackpool tomorrow evening, and thank you very much indeed. In a moment, we'll examine in more depth Michael Gove making his levelling up announcement. And I'm going to ask you, is it actually going to work?
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
It's Levelling Up Day. Michael Gove produces a white paper, proudly tells the House of Commons it will transform this country. Well, we can only hope that he's right. But do people really understand what levelling up is? Do people believe it's going to work? Well, Susan says to me, there's no money for it. It's just an attempt to save their own skins. They can waste $8 billion on rubbish PPE, but not invest in the people of this country. So sad. And the $8 billion. So remember the other day we talked about the $4.3 billion that's been lost in fraud through bounce-back loans and all the other government projects. Overnight we learned, and the Daily Mail led with this in a very big way today, that 8 billion quid's worth of PPE has been binned. So there is waste here on a huge scale. And when you add up the 4.3 and the 8, you get to a figure even bigger than the amount our taxes will rise by on the 1st of April. One viewer says, spending everywhere, but no mention of tax cuts. Well, I think tax incentives, back in the 80s, when we first saw big car plants going to the northeast like Nissan, these had been declared enterprise zones. I understood what that was all about. I get the concept of free ports, which Boris Johnson is pushing hard. I still don't fully understand how levelling up gets put into place. Elspeth on Twitter says it's all just a distraction from his failings. Treats us like idiots. We can see right through him. There's some real anger out there. Sharon says, not a cat in hell's chance of it working. Another viewer says, the short answer is no. There is not any money. It's just old funds being juggled about. Well, it's interesting this, because the idea that you can level up a country by just taking money from one area and chucking it at another area, I'm not sure that's the answer. You see, after the Berlin Wall came down, Germany decided it would level up. It would transfer huge funds from the wealthy Germany to the very much poorer East Germany. And yet, 30 years on, East Germany is still very much poorer than West Germany. And I think just this idea that chucking money at a problem, chucking government money at a problem, will solve a problem, I don't think it works. I've seen in my 20 years in the European Parliament, public money spent in large amounts, not actually achieving its goals. I think levelling up needs to be a lot more ambitious than just throwing money at the problem. Well, that's my view, but let's go to GB News' economics and business editor, Liam Halligan. Liam, good evening. We need some patience this evening.
We're here in Blackpool.
Liam, levelling up. Tell us what it means.
Well, as you say, Nigel, it's difficult to know, particularly when you look at this 250-page white paper produced by Michael Gove today, MP for Surrey, of course, a prosperous part of southern England. It was dismissed by his Labour shadow for levelling up, Lisa Nandy, MP for Wigan, as indicative of as a government that's out of energy and it is out of ideas. There was a 12-point plan, a lot of initiatives across housing, transport, infrastructure and education, as Mr Gove says, to reinvigorate forgotten areas of the UK. On the other hand, there is no additional money for these initiatives, and a lot of this 12-point plan, the white paper admitted, won't be delivered until 2030 at the earliest.
Yeah, Liam, you know, I heard Jacob Rees-Mogg at the weekend describing levelling up as this great incentive for business, with incentives, with cuts in regulation. I mean, a really traditional conservative free market argument for what levelling up was. And then I hear Michael Gove talking about money. I mean, do they know themselves here what they're really trying to do?
You and I talk often, Nigel, on screen and indeed in the GB News newsroom about what the Conservative Party stands for philosophically. Is it a party of low tax and incentives for business and for people to go to work, or is it a party, as it seems to be to some eyes under Boris Johnson, of much, much higher spending, albeit a lot of that spending has been during this pandemic? Does levelling up mean more government spending? In my view, I always thought of it as a scheme of tax incentives, free ports, enterprise zones, the sort of things that you were just talking about, but turbocharged, on speed if you like, to bring in more investment from around the country and indeed from around the world to tap into the undoubted entrepreneurial energy and vim that has been here for years, untapped, in places like Burnley where we were today, in places like Macclesfield where we were the day before, in places like Blackpool where I'll be broadcasting On the Money tomorrow at 1 p.m. Darren McCaffrey will be broadcasting his political programme at 3 p.m. and indeed you will be here tomorrow night, Nigel, here in Blackpool. All of us trying to work out what levelling up really is and always asking the local people what they think.
Is there a danger, Liam, finally, is there a danger that by talking so much about levelling up in the run-up to a 2019 general election in which many of those seats like Blackpool became, you know, Conservative, is there a danger they've raised public expectation of what is going to happen in their areas to too high a degree?
I think there is a danger. In Burnley, where we were earlier today, they haven't had a Tory MP since 1910, and they got one in 2019 on the promise not just of getting Brexit done, but also levelling up. Same here in Blackpool. Blackpool South now has a Tory MP after having a Labour MP for a long time. The government wants levelling up to be the centrepiece of its relaunch, moving us on from Partygate, from Downing Street shenanigans and Westminster theatrics, but it seems to me, talking to many people in Macclesfield, in Burnley, and I'm sure in Blackpool too when we get down to it tomorrow, that there is a lot of, I wouldn't say scepticism, but weary cynicism that the Tory party really believes that they can really make amends for previous political hurt that they've caused in these Northern and Midlands seats. They were lent their votes, the Tories, by seats like this in 2019. If Boris Johnson can't retain those seats, he'll lose his majority.
Yeah, no, it's as simple as that. Liam, I will see you in Blackpool tomorrow evening, and thank you. Now, the issue of migrants, and in particular the cross-channel illegal trade in migrants, was given a bit of a kickstart this morning when the French President Emmanuel Macron basically said it's all the fault of the Brits, and anyone that drowns in the Channel, it's our fault, even though, of course, the 27 that drowned not so long back all drowned on the French side of the divide. But today, Home Affairs Select Committee, firstly, we saw Tricia Hayes, second Permanent Secretary to the Home Office, say this about the housing of those that have come either across the Channel or recently from Afghanistan.
We have been doing a lot of work recently with the Local Government Association and with other councils to see how we can develop a new way of working with local authorities for asylum schemes, which recognises, as the Home Secretary said, the absolute financial as well as policy imperative of cutting the costs that we're currently incurring in hotels, which is now racking up at about £1.2 million every single day.
To get a handle on that, the hotel bill the government is paying for those who've come into this country and are now claiming asylum is £1.2 million every single day. There are 25,000 people in this situation living in hotels in our country. What did the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, have to say about this?
My views on all of this are pretty well known and documented. It is a thoroughly inadequate policy. It is not something that we want, and this is part of the reason why there is a lot of wider work taking place on asylum accommodation. We do not want people in hotels. We are looking at dispersed accommodation, first and foremost. We are looking at using and working with our partners in MOD, again, on alternative sites and alternative accommodation. It's right that we do that. And with that, of course, we are looking, as part of the new plan for immigration, work on reception centres. We should not be housing people in hotels.
Well, there's the Home Secretary saying hotels aren't the answer. We have to find lots more alternative accommodation. Well, Home Secretary, you're going to have to find a lot more alternative accommodation and probably many more hotels, because in Kent, over the course of the last few weeks, the reception centres for those crossing the Channel, it's not just Dover anymore. No, one's opened at Lydd, one's opened at Manston, and the one at Dover actually is being expanded. There are now 3 reception centres in Kent, and that is because the Home Office expect at least 65,000 people to cross the English Channel this year, all of whom will have to house. That's after, of course, we've given them a brand new mobile phone. And my intelligence says there are quite a number of boats queuing up to cross the Channel overnight. No doubt we'll hear more about that on GB News tomorrow. Now, today, the Prime Minister did finally have that phone call with Vladimir Putin. But the phone call, of course, took place after his meeting in the Ukraine. But the spokesman put out a statement saying the Prime Minister spoke to the Russian President Putin this afternoon. The Prime Minister expressed his deep concern about Russia's current hostile activity on the Ukrainian border. He emphasised the need to find a way forward which respects both Ukraine's territorial integrity and right to self-defence. The Prime Minister stressed that any further Russian incursion into Ukrainian territory would be a tragic miscalculation. The PM underscored that under NATO's open door policy, all European democracies have a right to aspire to NATO membership. This right fully applies to the Ukraine. He also reiterated that NATO is a defensive alliance. The leaders agreed that aggravation was in no one's interest. Now, there's something about that statement I want to go through with you. Ever since the Berlin Wall fell 30 years ago, it has been the policy of British governments, it has been the policy of NATO and the European Union to expand ever eastwards. That has been seen ever since those early days as a provocative act by Moscow. Now, I'm not saying that it is a provocative act, but there is always a historical degree of Russian paranoia about any level of encroachment on what they see as their space. And Boris Johnson, I would say this to you. At this moment, with 130,000 Russian troops massed on the border, to say that you would welcome the Ukraine to join NATO seems to me to be yet another huge geopolitical error. We ought to say Ukraine will not be joining NATO, and therefore, Mr. Putin, your reason for massing those troops on the border simply has gone, and put the ball back in his court. British Prime Minister has chosen to go along with all the other global leaders with that response. I believe it's the wrong one. Now, overnight, a very interesting, though perhaps controversial report from the Johns Hopkins University assessing in America and in Europe what the effect of lockdowns were. Did they reduce the number of people that died? Well, it is controversial. And Jonas Herby, who's the author of the Hopkins Institute study on lockdowns, joins me now. Jonas, good evening.
Good evening.
So what did you conclude? That lockdowns, surely by locking down, by keeping us away from each other, we must have reduced the numbers of people that died during this pandemic?
Our study shows that the lockdowns didn't really work as well as we expected. We did a meta-review where we look at all the evidence there are that links lockdowns to reductions of COVID death. And we find that the average lockdown in Europe and United States only reduced mortality by 0.2%.
0.2%.
Nothing near the what we were promised in the beginning of the pandemic. So, yeah.
And how do you calculate that figure? How do you come to that figure?
We haven't calculated anything ourselves. We have looked at all the studies that other researchers have done, and then we collect all of them and take basically we take the average of all their estimates, and the average estimate is this is 0.2%. So kind of meager effect, and we think the explanation to why the effect is so little is that people know how to take care of themselves. When there's a pandemic in the country, people adjust their behavior and they cancel birthdays and parties and meetings and so on. I'm sure all of the listeners and you experienced that in the beginning of the pandemic. And that caused the infection rates to drop despite, even if there is no lockdown.
Okay,
so people lock themselves down, basically.
Okay, so behavioural change and people not mixing closely did make a difference, but you're arguing it was done by people making their own minds up rather than being told by government to do so.
Exactly. That's what we think. We don't look into it in our study. We only look at the effect of lockdowns. But when we don't find any effect, it's natural to discuss why we don't see that. And we've seen a lot of studies that point to the behavioral changes. So they are very important. And I think everybody can relate to that. That in the beginning of the pandemic, we did wash our hands and keep a distance and so on. And for instance, on stay-at-home orders, there's several ways you can leave your home and still stay safe. So that's why we probably don't find a big effect on that.
If your report becomes accepted in time, we will then look back on governments on both sides of the Atlantic and say they made a huge historic error with these lockdowns that actually hurt a lot of people.
We don't look at the cost of lockdowns, but it's very natural to think that they're rather big. But it's important to think about who locks who down. As I told you, there's a large share of the effect is because we react to the pandemic. So a lot of the costs are because we take care of ourselves. So it's not all costs that are related to the lockdown. But of course, locking people down is expensive.
Yeah, in lots and lots of different ways. Jonas Herby from the Johns Hopkins Institute, thank you. And that debate that you've just heard there, this will go on for years. We will argue and debate for years whether what government did in terms of locking us down, taking away our liberties, stopping many people getting all sorts of cancer checkups, of diabetes screening. The debate will go on for years as to how Western governments handled this, and I suspect they won't come out of it very well. So, back to our thoughts on this whole levelling up agenda. And I was pleased to see, actually, that Liam Halligan, our economics and business editor, is as confused as I am in terms of what the government really intends to do. As for your views, one viewer says, of course it won't work, not under Johnson and his blasé spending. Kim says, Boris could level up by opening coal and gas fields, which would create jobs that are needed, get fracking and forget net zero. Well, I'm absolutely all for forgetting net zero. I can't see why we should really inflict upon ourselves such an act of self-harm. Ian says the only valid way to level up is to work hard, use your ability as best as possible, take some risks and take opportunities when offered. Well, that is all pretty good advice. Well, interestingly, all those comments on gas and net zero, I'm going to be joined in a moment by somebody who was Minister for Energy and Climate Change, also a former Treasurer of the Tory party. In a moment, I'll be joined on Talking Pints by Lord Jonathan Marland, a Conservative peer.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
The GB News pub is well and truly open this evening, and Lord Jonathan Marland, Conservative peer, joins me. Welcome to Talking Pints.
Very good health.
Now, we have a couple of things in common. We decided to skip university and head straight for the City of London. It was a fun place to work in those days, wasn't it?
Incredible, wasn't it? Did you go to the George and Vulture? Do you remember that?
Regularly,
Simpsons,
yes.
all that.
Yes. I mean, it was... We didn't do a lot of work, did we, really?
Well, I think I kind of did. We started our first business when we were 25, or I started in the first business when we were 25, and it was full on because we were, and you remember this, as a young lad coming to the city, you know, it was all quill pens and dead man's shoes, and we were sort of like spivs on the block. And so we, at 25, starting in a new business and starting in the Lloyd's insurance industry was like sort of, hang on.
A strange thing to do.
Well, it was, and we got a lot of criticism, and we were sort of 25 years younger than the next competition. And then, of course, Lloyd's went bust, basically, and it was an incredible period of stress as we sort of tried to help rebuild it.
Yeah.
So I'd have to say it was very hard work. I think I've had two incredible spells of hard work. That was that period. And then when I was a government minister, which is like, you know.
Yeah, the difference, of course, is if you have success in the commercial world in insurance, as you do, you can make money, you can lose money, but you have actually a private life as well at the weekends. You can go and play golf or do whatever you want to do. What pushed you into politics?
It was an odd thing. People kept saying to me when I was in my late 20s, you'll go into politics. And I sort of thought, you must be daft. I sort of thought this was absolutely ridiculous. And I'd pretty much given up working in the city when I was about 37, 38. And I met Michael Howard. And Michael Howard said, you ought to give it a go. And I've always been I am a huge fan of Michael's. He was a man of great integrity, and I mean, obviously was criticised in many ways like any politician, but he's always been he's got rare things in a politician: complete loyalty and great personal integrity. And I liked that in him. And I got involved in his campaign to be leader, the unsuccessful one, when he did the deal with Hague, and Hague decided not to pursue that. And it's sort of, you know what politics are like, but
Once you're in.
Nigel, it's a drug.
Yeah, it's like a lobster pot, isn't it? You see the bait, in you go, you can't get out. I know all about it.
Exactly.
You talk about backing Howard and Howard's qualities and personal integrity.
Yeah.
You also, of course, have known Boris Johnson very well for a long time. And the big question that's being asked now are questions about his personal integrity and his relationship with the truth.
Well, you know, the people have different qualities, and if you look at Boris's qualities, which are totally different from Michael's, as you want to compare them, and in many ways similar to your own, you know, Boris gets up every morning and thinks everything is possible. And you have those similar traits yourself, and I do too. He's got enormous enthusiasm, huge energy, great drive. He's got incredible charisma, and arguably, like you, can reach parts that the electorate that haven't been reached before. And it'll be a big mistake for the Conservative Party to knife him.
But I return to the point. You know, you talked about personal integrity.
Yeah.
Michael Howard. I wouldn't question that for a moment.
Yeah.
But it's Boris's integrity that's on trial now, isn't it?
Correct.
And we've seen 3 more MPs today
Yeah.
have withdrawn their support. I mean, he's not going to survive this, is he?
Well, I'm not sure about those MPs' integrity. I mean, if they actually put the nation first, they wouldn't want to be having sorry, Nigel. If they wouldn't want to be having a Conservative leadership campaign that's going to take 8 weeks of infighting as people posture for position, they wouldn't want that and shouldn't want it at this particular time of national importance. And this is an incredibly important next few months, I think, for the country. As you, I hope, would agree, the Brexit dividend has got to be well and truly sorted out, and hasn't been.
Why?
Well, I think they've been derailed, but I don't think they've realised that they have got to sort it. And I think once it registers...
But they've got an 80-seat majority on the back of it.
But, you know, they've had COVID and crosswinds and all...
I get the COVID thing, and I do understand that.
And you and I both want to push them really hard to get that Brexit dividend, and I'm doing as such. We've got to have the Brexit dividend. We've got a real challenge on energy crisis, as you have enunciated, and you know there hasn't been planning for the transition to net zero. There really hasn't been enough planning for the transition to net zero.
But that's the other problem, isn't it, Jonathan? You know, Boris was elected as a Conservative. He's leading as a Liberal. The commitment... Well, that's my...
Thank God we're in a pub.
Well, that's the great thing about this. There's a great thing about this part of the show. We can have a chat, you know, and you can say what you like. And neither side takes offence, you know. But the commitment to net zero. Here we are, a country producing less than... I don't know, and you were there as the Minister for Energy and Climate Change. Less than 1% of the world's CO2. We're prepared to beggar our industries, put people's bills through the roof. I mean, how have we got to the point where 25% of people's electricity bills already a green subsidy? There's something wrong here, isn't there?
Well, I'm not going to disagree with you. I mean, I think what is also wrong is this sort of business of littering the countryside with solar panels, taking away farmland which could be used, which we're going to be desperate for food security, rewilding, all these sort of things which are not practical policies.
You're pretty sceptical of much of this government, aren't you, really?
No, I'm sceptical about some of the government. Those elements I am, and I've been quite clear. You know, Boris has got to lose the fluff from his policies and get back to core policies which he believes in and which your old friend Linton Crosby would advise him on, and Linton would call it getting the barnacles off the boat. And I think that is going to be the challenge, and if he can show that, he deserves a chance to deliver it. He deserves a chance to deliver the levelling up.
Yeah, well, we'll come to levelling up in a moment. We've been debating it all evening.
I've heard you.
I mean, none of us know what it means. What does it mean? When we had the Northern Powerhouse with Osborne, and I never knew what that meant, and nothing ever happened. And now we have levelling up. But I want to get back to this point about energy and climate change. I mean, just give us in 30 seconds the Marland solution. What do we do about our energy requirements going ahead?
Well, I've always been a strong believer in gas, and when I was in that department, we realised that gas was going to be the backstop. I was actually quite keen on fracking and asked the department to set up the office of fracking so that we could really understand it. because that is cheap homeland energy security.
Lots of jobs.
And lots of jobs. I'm also keen on the transition to a greener economy because it's better for our emissions. You rightly say in the context of the world our emissions are minor, but it is good housekeeping. It is something that we should be looking at. I think recycling, reusing of plastics, and in fact not having plastic at all would be a terribly good thing. Amazing, everything you open these days got layers and layers of plastic. We go through about 4 layers.
No, I wouldn't disagree with you on any of this.
Well, I don't disagree with you on it.
Those of us that are questioning net zero are not saying let's go back to burning coal on a huge scale.
No.
China and India are doing that anyway. But it's just this cost on people's bills, the cost that's already there, the proposed move to heat pumps, electric cars are more expensive. To me, it's a sort of very upper middle class, wealthy group of people around Boris Johnson have convinced him this is the right thing to do. But for ordinary folk, this is not affordable, is it?
Well, I think there's a large part of the electorate, and particularly the younger generation, who see this as the future. So I don't think it's a coterie of upper middle class people around Boris persuading him. I think there is a general mood and understandable mood within the country that we have got to manage the earth better than we are doing. We have got to stop throwing pollutants into the world.
Yeah.
And I think it's a perfectly reasonable and acceptable policy. The issue is, and this is where I think you and I do, the Venn diagram does cross, is what is the transition? How do we get from there to there? Because it is not possible to go to net zero today without there being a massive cost on the taxpayer.
I know. Jonathan, I must ask you, as somebody that was Tory party treasurer, there are always arguments over party funding. Now, of course, I have to say I far prefer private individuals giving money to politics than state funding of politics. Where you have state funding of politics, you have state regulation of parties, and that worries me. But the connection between donors and then becoming members of the House of Lords, it stinks. The country hates it. No, the country hates it.
Yes, yeah. Well, you're probably asking the wrong person because I obviously have given money to the party. I then sort of hoped to pay it back when I was a minister and worked for nothing. But when I became treasurer, the first thing I did was impose a rule that you couldn't give more than 50,000 a year to the party during a calendar year, with the exception of election year. And I felt that was a reasonable figure, and I felt the public would live with that figure because it wasn't, 50,000 is a lot of money, I grant you, but it's not 5 million or $1.5 billion. And I thought that was a good discipline. In an election period, you have this huge, intense period where you've got to raise, you were going from 6 million a year, you've got to raise 20 million a year.
I mean that,
you've obviously got
okay, but should big donors go to the House of Lords?
Well, I think the criteria for going to the House of Lords is as follows. One, have you made a big contribution to society? Have you done things outside of your business career?
Not just to a party, not just a big contribution to a party.
No, I'm talking business contributions.
I know you.
You are such a cynic, honestly.
I'm just teasing you, that's all.
I was teasing. But you've got to have built a substantial business or done some something very creative.
Yeah.
You've got to have made a contribution to things outside of your business and wealth for the benefit of society. And, if by chance you've given £500,000 to a party, whatever it is.
Well,
those are.
I tell you what, the
next
time there's a big House of Lords funding row, I'm going to get you back on the programme. Jonathan
It'll be a
Martin,
privilege.
Thank you for joining me on Talking Pints. Coming towards the end of the programme, I have a few seconds left, but it is time for Barrage the Farage. And I am going to have a look here and see what the first one is. Paul says, will the North ever get the levelling up it needs, especially in public transport, or is it another smokescreen? Whether it's a smokescreen or not, there was a genuine desire to level the country up. There's a genuine need to level the country up. If you think the public transport systems in small towns in the north of England are ever going to be like London, you're living in a dreamland. Will the UK ever get control of its borders? Let's ask Jonathan Marlon that one.
Oh, God, blimey. I thought I was here for a drink. I think you can judge that better than I can, because it's tough. and it really is tough, particularly if you have a problem with the French.
Which we do.
Which we do.
But then again, we have for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
30 seconds left on programme. Do you miss being an MEP? Do I miss being in Brussels and Strasbourg? Do I miss being in a city where even coffee bars refused to serve me? Where I was the most hated person that's ever been inside the institution? Booed every time I stood up. Yeah, I miss it terribly, really, because the theatre and the drama was magnificent. We're out of time. I'm in Blackpool tomorrow night. Please join me for that. Right now, though, let's see what the weather's going to do.
Hi there. A cloudy night for most of us, with some rain, mainly towards the northwest, and it will be mild with that blanket of cloud covering the UK. A warm front has gone through that continues to march northeastwards overnight, and following that warm front, we've got a westerly breeze and mild, moist air coming in off the Atlantic. So that breeze is bringing that